Hi everyone, welcome. In this video, let's talk about AWS Data Migration Service. Okay, so this is a service that AWS provide that can help you migrate and replicate data to AWS. Okay, it doesn't just end there. Sometimes you can migrate your data from on-premise to AWS or from another cloud provider to AWS or within AWS itself. Basically, it's just a data migration tool that AWS will provide. Okay. So as you can see here, all you need to understand is you need to have what we call your source data, where you want to migrate or copy your data from. That is your source database. And then you need to have what we call your target or your destination database. So in between, this is where you need your data migration service. Okay, so in the migration service, you have what we call a replication instance. This is just like a compute that is going to orchestrate everything. You need to also provide what we call your database endpoint, both source and then destination or the target endpoint. So the endpoint should contain the login credential for the database, for the target database, and then for the source database. It also contains the database name going forward. So let's quickly go through and then we're gonna dive into the practical side of things and then we'll probably understand it much better. So like I said, it's just a way we can migrate, move data from one point to another, whether within AWS, from on-premise to AWS, or from another cloud provider to AWS. That is gonna make us, our data migration more efficient instead of you exporting it manually. And how does it work? So your migration instance or your data migration service will connect to your source database, perform some analysis, copy the data, transform it depending on what database you are using. If it's Postgres, sometimes you need to allow what we call replication inside your source database, and then it will copy all the data, and then you have your copy from your source into your what we call your target database. Okay, so what I want to say is let's talk about the component. So the main component, we have what we call the replication instance. So this is the computer I talk about. This is the engine. This is the main thing that is moving the data from the source to the destination. It's basically going to extract, transform, and load the data depending on the configuration that you set. Okay, depending on how powerful you want, you pick up your compute type going forward. Okay, so again, we have what we call the endpoint. So the endpoint is basically is the connection from your source to your target. Basically, the replication instance needs to connect from the source and then also to your target endpoint. The endpoint should contain your host name, the credential for you to authenticate to the target or to the source database. Okay. And again, the replication task, this is where the actual magic happens. So you define your task, what you want to happen in there. There are three things that you need to bear in mind here. If you want to do a full load, basically copy every existing data from the source to the target, okay, or what we have we call CDC, basically just to have a stream of changes that can only happen. So if a change happen in the source data, you only going to copy that changes in the source data to the destination database basically. So it compares the changes and then copy the changes. That's what we call the CDC. Or you can set it up in such a way that you can load all the data, okay, and also copy the changes. So this is a continuously synchronization. It's going to sync your data. So you load it, the initial data from the source to the destination, and then afterwards any changes that happen in the source data, you want to continuously copy that and sync it to the destination or the target um, database. Okay, let's quickly go to the console and then let's do the practical side of things. That will make things much clearer. So let me go into my AWS here. um, right, so here I have my cluster here. So this um, Postgres cluster, okay, that is my source. I'm going to use it as a source database. It has some data in there. I will show you. And then I have a freshly created another database, also Postgres. I'm going to move the data from the source here into the target database. Okay, but before you move the data from the source to the destination, in the source database, you need to allow what we call replication in the database. So in the settings, so the setting for the DB or the database, we call it parameter groups. So you're gonna go into the parameter group of the database, make changes to the settings to allow replication, okay, and then afterwards you update or you reboot the instance or the database. So let's do that. So if you go into this, let's go in actually let's go into the configuration. What is that configuration? Okay, can you see we have this um, parameter group? Okay, so let's go into this parameter group, and what we are looking for, let's edit that. Okay, and what we are looking for, what we need to allow is what we call the replication. Let's look for replication, RDS replication. Where is it? RDS logical replication. This is the one you need. Okay, all you need to do, you need to set it to 1. Okay, that means you are allowing replication to happen from the source, and then all you need to do is to save. Okay, so once the changes has been saved, if you go to the database, you will see, let's come here, cancel that. When you come to the database instance, okay, you could see that, where is the configuration? Let's go to the configuration, config. You could see the cluster parameter group. Remember, is the cluster parameter group that we apply the changes to. Okay, it's waiting to be applied. It's applying, it's not sync. We need to reboot it for this thing to work. Okay, so we will reboot our instance. So we say check the box, and then we go to actions and then reboot, just to apply the parameter change. The parameter change is the settings, yeah, allowing replication to happen from the source, okay, and then it will publish it to the destination. You don't need to do that in the destination or the target database. Okay, right. So what I want to show you after the reboot is to look at the data inside of the source database, and then I'll see if that data exists in the destination. It will not be there actually. So when we replicate it afterwards, we'll be able to see that data inside our source has been moved or pushed into the destination database. Okay, so to do that, to connect to my database, I have what we call a bastion host. Because this DB is in a private subnet, I can't straight away connect to it. So I have created a bastion host. Those of you who are not sure how to, connect to a DB inside a private subnet leveraging on bastion host, I have done a separate video. Please go and watch it. But let's go through. So let me look for my EC2 actually. Where's my EC2? Okay, let's go to the EC2. Let me open this in a new tab here. Okay, and then we're gonna connect to the EC2. So, okay, connect to that. Network is a little bit slow today. And let's check that box. And then what we need to do is to connect. So we're gonna use Session Manager to connect, and then we say connect. Now we just connected to the Bastion host via Session Manager. Let's grab the database endpoint trying to connect to the database, and then we will see the data inside that database. So let's go in here. So that DB, the source database. Let's have a look. So what I need to do is to copy that, copy the export. Okay, go to the bastion. Let's remove that. Okay, export that and town that, and then go back to again, and then copy that one. Let's go back to the session manager, and then again paste that one there, and then what I need to do is to close that, enter on that, and then gonna provide my password. Okay, and then we are in. So inside of it, let's look at the table that I've got. So let me see. This is it. Okay, so just to check it, I can quickly use that just to check all the DB that I have. So come back here, then you enter on that. So I've got this tables. Okay, this is the one I'm particularly interested. So what we can say here, we can say select. Let's select, and then what we're gonna select, let's select all, and then what are we selecting from? The users, from the users. Okay, so we have that, enter, and this is what we have in that table. Okay, right. The other one, the other DB, let me exit this one, exit. If we exit this and then we check the other DB, we will have nothing in there. So if we go to the other one, other database, the target database, we're just going to check it. I copy that, go back to the session manager, and then try that one, try and connect to that, enter, and then again, let's grab the endpoint. Let's grab the endpoint here, copy that, come back to session manager. We're gonna paste that one there, and then we're gonna close it, enter, and I need to provide a password, enter on that. So if I do the same thing, so this command, or let's go for that, I will have no table in here because this is the destination and it's empty. It doesn't contain anything. So that's what we got. That is empty. So we are going to do the data migration into this and see what happens. So let me go to the data migration. And then we're gonna search for data migration. Let me just open this in a new tab quickly. So in here, this is where we have our data migration, like I said in the previous slide. So this is where we are interested. We are going to create replication instance. We're going to create an endpoint, and then we're going to create a task. Okay, the instance is the actual VM that is going to orchestrate everything. The endpoint is just to connect to the databases, and the task is actually going to define what needs to happen on the instance to move data, what data to be moved, what type of data to be moved, how to move them, basically what happen in the task. Okay, so let's create the instance itself. Okay, let's go to create an instance. That one takes a little bit while, so let's do that one first, and then we do the rest. So let's call it application instance. That will do. Okay, can leave the way everything is, and then let's pick how powerful we want this instance to be. This is fine. Let's leave everything the way it is. Allocation, leave the way it is. Leave the engine the way it is. Availability zones, if you want to have what we call multi-AZ, you can pick that for your production workload, or we can just pick a single AZ. This is just for testing purposes. For network and connectivity, IP version 4, leave it the way it is. If you have your own VPC, you can provision that in your VPC. So for now, we are just, leveraging on the default VPC. Okay, the default subnet, we're leveraging on that. You know what? Let's uncheck this. We don't want it to be public. Okay, and then what we need to do, look into the advanced settings, leave the way everything is here. So here you can also create your security group. Okay, I have one created. So for the ingress of this security group can be empty. You don't need to allow anything coming in or out, yeah, but you need to allow the egress to everything. Okay, so for the, let me go into, so let me DM application. I'll have a look and show you what it is. So basically, it's not allowing any ingress on that. Pick that, pick your security group or create one. Okay, leave the way everything is. Let's look at what is in here. Leave everything the way it is now. Automatic version upgrade, minor version upgrade, you leave it. Have a quick once over. Once you're happy, you create it. Okay, okay, that's it, we create it. No problem. So that is the machine, the VM, that is going to handle the connection from the source and the destination that is getting created now. What we can do is to create the endpoint. So we have the source and then the target endpoint. So the source endpoint and the target endpoint. Let's have a look. So the source endpoint. So because our DB is within our AWS account, so we can pick and then we select the DB, which is our source. This is our source. Okay, this is the one that holds the data we want to move. Okay, we pick the source, and then straight away, we can pick, you can see the engine that we are running on. All right, the credentials, if you have it in secret manager, you pick secret manager. For the one we created, we provided the credentials manually. By that, we input in our password and username. This is the server name. Basically, this is the endpoint of the database. Okay, and this is our port, and we have the username to connect to the DB, similar to the one I connected to the session manager virtual machine. So the password, you provide a password here. Okay, and then the right SSL, TLS. This is SSL. We require that. Okay, if you don't select that, it will fail. If you select none, it will fail. So select the required, and then the database name. Okay, so we know our database name. If you go in here, so database name, so this is, go back here, show you. So we're running on Postgres, yeah, so we can literally go to Postgres and then just get one done. Let me show you quickly. So you can see the database name, or is that the DB name, Postgres. Yeah. Oh, so we can literally go back to the endpoint creation and then put the database name here. Okay. There's a few more settings if you want to do more. So you can look at the endpoint setting, add more if you want to. Okay, keep adding the endpoint setting. If you have any either endpoint you want to add, you do that. The rest you can leave it the way it is. You can test it before you create it here, or you can just create it and test it afterwards. Okay, have a quick once over, make sure you have selected what you need, and then you create. So authentication, access manually, that is the username, password, require Postgres, and then we good. Okay, all we need to do is to create the endpoint. Okay, not now. So that's the source endpoint. We can create another endpoint for the destination or the target. Okay, again, our target is within our AWS. Okay, that's our target DB. You leave everything the way it is. The password, again, we're going to supply here. And then what we need to do is to supply the password. Okay, again, the SSL TLS or the SSL required, you select that. The DB, again, Postgres, you put it there. And then if you have a separate DB name, you put it here. But the one we are using is this one. You can do additional settings on the endpoint again, and the rest you can leave it the way it is, and then again you create that. Now, okay, let's check our replication instance is ready. Our endpoint is being created. So what we can do is to check. We can check and make sure our endpoint is working. So let's test it and see. Test endpoint, run a test. It's testing. Let's give it a few minutes and then let's see the results. Yeah, and then our test at the source endpoint has been a success. We can test the other endpoint, our target endpoint, just to make sure everything is fine. The replication instance will be able to connect. So let's run a test on this again. Right, so the target database endpoint test has also passed successfully. Okay, so now we have our replication instance ready. We have our endpoint tested. We need to create our task. Okay, so basically, if you look at the slide I showed you earlier, so we got our source database, we created that, we create our target database. The target database had no data in it, the source has the data in it. Okay, we created endpoint, we created endpoint for the target too. We created replication instance, that is the instance, so we need the instance so the instance can connect and do a test on the source and then the target. That's what we've done. We're going to create the task itself, what we want the replication to do, what we want the data that we are going to migrate to do. Are we going to load all of them? Are we going to have CDC in it? This is where we're going to leverage on now. So let's go back to the um, yeah, to the DMS, and then here let's create a task. On here we say create task, and then we give it a task name. So let's say dev replication application or something. Yeah, you can leave the ARN, and then you need to pick the source. Basically, we are doing the connection. See the arrow, that is where we are going to connect. The source points to the replication instance, the target point to the replication instance. So let's go back here And then what we need to do is to pick the source ARN, see the source ARN, and then you pick your target ARN. Okay, so we are connecting things together. We are using provision. You can pick up the serverless if you want to, but let's pick the provision and pick the instance, because when we are creating the replication instance, we pick provision. So we pick replication instance, the one we created, and then what we need to do is to migrate and then replicate. We are not just migrating the data, we are not loading just the data and just finish it. Okay, we want to migrate all the data and then also continuously replicate. If there's any changes that will happen in the source, we want to copy that change into our destination or our target database. Okay, that's what the CDC for. So we select that. If you just want to copy only the change, okay, then you pick the replicate. For this one, the data is in the source has to be the same as the data in the target, and you are only copying the difference basically. Okay, so again here you leave the way it is for now, disable the custom so by default, and then here too you leave the way it is. Okay, and then the target table preparation, the target table is empty database, there's nothing in there, so we're not literally gonna prepare anything. We can say just drop the table on the target if there's anything at all, but there's nothing in there, or do nothing. Okay, or truncate, but let's pick, drop table if there's anything but there's nothing, that's fine. And then the stop task after full load complete, do not stop task because we want to continuously replicate. Include large object columns. Okay, so for that one you can either have a full, just load all the full large object, or you can do bit by bit, just limited. Okay, let's go for the full, and then what we can do is here, just in the large chunk, let's say the larger chunk do 32, and then when you want to load one at a time, you want you to load like 16 or half of it basically. Okay, and then the data validation, for now let's turn it off. We just want to migrate straight away from the source and then to our target. We're not validating any data for now. The log, let's leave the way everything is now. Let's look at what is in the setting here. Leave everything the way it is. The table mapping, let's look at what is in there too. Let's look at the rules. Okay, here too you can make some changes. If you want to ignore certain data or certain table, this is where you do it. So this percentage sign means just do everything, copy everything, include everything basically, all the tables and all the schemas, just copy everything. You can transform certain things if you want to from the source. If you want it to be transformed into a different table or different format, you can use a transform here. We're not using that. Again, we're not doing pre-migration assessment, we can leave that. Okay, and then what we need to do, we want to trigger this manually. We don't want to create this and straight away it will start doing the migration. So for now, let's pick manually, and then we will do that later. Okay, so quick once over, make sure you're happy. Whatever you need is in there all the way to the bottom. Keep going down, make sure you are okay with it, and what you need to do is to create the task. Okay, so wait for the task to complete, and then we will do we initialize or kind of trigger the replication or the data movement. Okay, it looks as if the task creation has completed. So now, um, if we click into this or check this box, okay, we can literally start the data migration. Okay, and what it's going to do is full load. It's going to load the data, okay, from the source to the destination, and afterwards it will continuously check any changes from the source and then move that changes or replicate the changes to the destination. So let's trigger that. Okay, so let's start and then start migration. Okay, you can check this box again or click into it and then have a look at it more into details. You can see the table that will be replicated. You see them here. Okay, but for now, let's wait and see if there's any changes or if there's any error, then we will fix it. Okay, again, that is the table that will be loaded. You can allow CloudWatch do some monitoring on that. You can check the table mapping here if you want to set the rules or the transformation, or here the pre-migration assessment. If you allow that, you have that pre-migration assessment also being populated here, and then you can tag your resources. Okay, let's go back to the table here. Let's look at it. Right, see, it's loaded complete. Okay, but we will still have the replication going on. Okay, as you can see that data, where is that? Can you see the user table has been moved? Right, so now let's go back to the database and check back into the session manager bit where we had the database. So remember, previously we had nothing. We logged into this database. Remember the the target database. We connected to that. We trying to see if we can find data, and there was nothing. Okay, so for now, what we can do is to try again and then see if you get lucky. Enter. Yeah, now you can see we got something here, and then again we can actually check the table. Let me copy this command, and then what we need to do is to paste it here and see if we can see the table. Okay, enter. Yeah, and this is what we can see in the destination database. Okay, so we can literally exit this and then add or insert a table or insert a data into the table, and then we'll be able to see it in here. But I hope this one helped somebody out there. um Let me go back and then we can do a quick summary. What we've done is what we call database migration. And what we need to understand is you need to have your source. It doesn't matter where it is. Okay, it could be on-prem, it could be from a different cloud provider or within AWS itself, and you want to migrate from any database, MySQL to Postgres or anywhere. Okay, what you need is data migration service. You have your source, you need to have your destination. You need to create data migration, and with creating the data migration you need to create what we call replication instance. You need to have your endpoint, have your replication task, okay, that will perform the loading, and then either to load or replicate continuously, that will be set in the replication. You need to also set your connection for the target. Okay, and then once you're done, you should just test and make sure that all the data has been populated in your target or destination folder. Okay, I hope this helped. I will see you in my next video. Happy learning. Bye bye.